Locked On Podcast Network and Odyssey present Locked On Sports Today.
Dak Prescott could miss 2 months, adding injury to insult for the Cowboys. Patrick Mahomes apparently doesn't miss Tyreek Hill. The Vikings showed us why what's on paper means nothing on the field. I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't-miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers beat down the Dallas Cowboys 19-3 on Sunday Night Football. But the bigger news coming out of Dallas, Dak Prescott is going to need surgery on his throwing hand. It was reported by NFL media that it was 6 to 8 weeks potentially. We will see what the timeline is here in the next few days. Joining me now from Dallas, Isaiah Stanback, Super Bowl champion Isaiah Stanback, our NFL insider. And Isaiah, this was a game that already portended ominous things for the Dallas Cowboys, and now you lose your quarterback. How do you hold this thing together in Dallas?
Well, the quick answer is you don't. Things, if you didn't already feel that things were melting down in Dallas, that they were already off to a really rough start, that they looked like a team that had no preseason. All these things now are compounded with the fact that Dak Prescott, their leader, their QB1, their $40 million man, it will no longer be a part or be able to compete for them over the next most likely 6 to 8 weeks. With what apparently is a thumb injury to his throwing hand. I mean, you can see it on the sideline when he was talking to the head surgeon / doctor for the Dallas Cowboys. And he asked him, Dr. Cooper, can you grip the ball? And Dak shook his head, no. You knew before even the report came out, I saw that, and I knew that was not a good sign. And we've seen this before with quarterbacks. We saw this a couple of years back with Russell Wilson. Obviously it may not be the same injury, but anytime you start talking about ligaments in the hand, and quarterbacks in their throwing hand, it's never good news.
So for the Cowboys, where do you go from here? And if you're Jerry Jones, how do you evaluate this team moving forward? Because this felt like a Super Bowl or bust kind of season. Jerry has said things to that effect. And so if you're ownership, what are you looking for here?
Honestly, I don't know what you do. This is the worst case scenario. These guys were already trying to overcome a lot of different forms of adversity from this offseason alone. You had, James Washington, who you brought in as a free agent. He went down. You have Michael Gallup that you're trying to rehab, that you opted to keep off of PUP in IR. You're still trying to nurse him back to health. So you're without 2 of your top 3 receivers. You have a CD Lamb that you are still trying to see, is he truly a number 1 receiver, even though we've put him at the number 1 on depth chart. We saw today that he had 2 receptions for 29 yards. It's not indicative of a number 1 receiver, nor did he show the body language and leadership qualities of a number 1. Now all of a sudden you have Tyron Smith, who was your all-pro, multiple all-pro left tackle. He went down in a practice, prior to the season kickoff. So you take your left guard, who was your first-round draft pick, at Tyler Smith, bump him out the left tackle to try to fulfill a role, sign, Mr. Peters, 40-year-old left tackle, and now you're going to try to put him at the guard position. Oh, and by the way, your left guard, who's a starter, he got rolled up on in today's game. There's so many moving parts right now for the Dallas Cowboys. The strength of their team is the defense. That's something that you haven't been able to say about them in a long time. They actually held up really well tonight. First 5 possessions for Tampa Bay, they were forced to kick field goals. But you can't expect this defense over the next 6 to 8 weeks until Dak comes back to hold things down in that manner. It's just not possible. And you definitely can't expect Cooper Rush to win you 6 to 8 ball games.
And making matters worse for the Cowboys, Washington got to win today. Philly got to win today. And New York, somewhat miraculously, got a win today. I know it's just 1 week, but all of a sudden the NFC East looks even more wide open than we thought it would, because maybe Washington and New York are a little bit better than we thought.
You're absolutely correct. I mean, Dallas is the only team in the NFC East that decided to not get a victory tonight. And that's not good news, because you look at a Washington team that, most people kind of look down upon because of their quarterback, Carson Wentz. Well, he somehow shows up. Then you got the New York Giants that they find a way to pull something out. And then the Philadelphia Eagles, who are the favorite in the NFC East this year, those guys actually look like they should be the favorite. So those other three teams that you're going to be competing with to try to get to the playoffs, now those guys actually look like they're competitors, and you don't have a way to be competitive. So it's not looking very good, especially with the Super Bowl appearing Cincinnati Bengals coming off of a loss and coming off of coming into Dallas Cowboys arena or AT&T Stadium in Dallas next week. It's not looking good at all.
Thanks for making Locked On Sports today your first listen. Coming up, Tyreek Hill, not missed in Kansas City after all. Here's what to look for on BetOnline, your number one spot for all of your gambling needs. Let's look at some Monday night football lines. The Denver Broncos favored on the road over the Seattle Seahawks. BetOnline has the Broncos -6.5. BetOnline has the Broncos total points over under at 24.5. And in his first game as a quarterback of the Broncos, BetOnline has Russell Wilson's passing over under set at 255.5. BetOnline, where the game starts. The Pittsburgh Steelers pulled out a huge road victory in Week 1 over the Cincinnati Bengals, but may have some questions to answer about the rest of the season with a key injury.
Your Pittsburgh Steelers got a huge win, 23-20 in overtime at the buzzer from a Chris Boswell field goal traveling 53 yards against the Cincinnati Bengals. They go 1-0 on the season in a huge way. My biggest takeaway, I'm Chris Carter of the Locked On Steelers podcast. This is your quick hit Locked On Now. My biggest takeaway, y'all. This defense is ridiculous. Now, yes, we got to see what's up with TJ Watt. It's believed that he may have torn his pec. If he is, that looks like maybe a season-long injury. But this was a team effort from the defense. Alex Highsmith got 3 sacks. Minkah Fitzpatrick had the pick 6, 14 tackles, and a blocked extra point that kept the team alive. This was just a true team win at all costs. Now, did they in doing so, did they cost themselves the season? And not cost themselves, is the injury to TJ Watt season ending? We're going to find out. But there's a lot to break down from this game. I'm Chris Carter of the Locked On Steelers podcast. Man, it's crazy. That was just one of the craziest roller coasters we're on. I'll have a lot more for you on the full episode of the Locked On Steelers podcast. Stay tuned on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. We'll be breaking it a lot more down here, right here on Locked On Steelers.
Nebraska fired football coach Scott Frost on Sunday. The move comes one day after a 45-42 home loss to Georgia Southern in what had become an untenable situation for the Huskers. The 1-2 Nebraska program was a 3-touchdown favorite. Associate head coach Mickey Joseph will take over for the rest of the season. Nebraska hosts Oklahoma on Saturday. Vice Chancellor for Athletics Trev Albert said the goal moving forward with both interim coach Joseph and into the future is to stop looking at the past and focus on what needs to be done to win. Speaking of the college gridiron, the rankings got quite the shakeup. Georgia leapfrogged Alabama for the number 1 spot. The Bulldogs haven't allowed a touchdown yet, while the Crimson Tide squeaked by a Longhorns team they were favored by 3 touchdowns against. The top 10 upheaval continued as Notre Dame dropped out of the top 25 completely for the first time since 2017 after they lost to Marshall. Texas A&M fell from 5 to 24 after they lost to Appalachian State. Meanwhile, USC jumped up to 7, their highest ranking in 5 years, and Kentucky climbed to number 9, their highest ranking since 2007 after their stunning win over Florida. And on the diamond, Julio Rodriguez and Eugenio Suarez delivered the Seattle Mariners a heroic win over the Atlanta Braves.
Oh, this baseball team is going to take so many years off of my life the next month. This is Ty Gonzalez, host of the Locked On Mariners podcast, and the Mariners went from potentially having their most deflating loss of the entire year to having their most exhilarating win of the year in about 15 or so minutes time. They blow a 6-1 lead and go into the bottom of the ninth down 7-6 to the defending champion Braves, facing Kenley Jansen, one of the most decorated closers in baseball. And Julio Rodriguez and Eugenio Suarez come through with 2 insanely clutch home runs, solo home runs to tie this game and eventually win this game, stunning the Braves and stealing a series victory after it seemed that the Braves had stolen a series victory. So we're going to be covering this game on the Locked On Mariners podcast. Check us out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you then. Peace.
Tyreek Hill, more like Tyreek who? Kansas City Chiefs 44, Arizona Cardinals 21. Patrick Mahomes 30 of 39 for 365 touchdowns and a passer rating that would make you blush. Joining me now from Locked On Chiefs, Chris Clark. And Chris, this was a beatdown. It was a bit surprising. We don't expect anyone to just walk into the season performing like this, especially not a team that just lost one of the best receivers in the league. How did they do it?
They moved the ball around. You look at 10 different targets, I think, for Mahomes in this game. I think 9 had catches. 10th got really close. They have so many different weapons at so many different levels. Wide receivers, tight ends, running backs. Clyde Edwards-Helaire got 2 touchdown catches. I mean, who saw that coming in week 1? He has not been effective in the passing game in the past couple of seasons, and he was effective today. And then you look at Kansas City being able to run the ball. They had 4 plays that went over 18 yards on rushes, and they didn't have, I think they had 5 all of last season, and they had 4 today.
Wow. Offensively, in terms of the pass catchers, you mentioned 10 targets and Travis Kelce right there at the top. There was some question that without Tyreek Hill, would they be able to get the ball to Travis Kelce as effectively? Question answered, it sounds like.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think it was easy. I think that you look at what Travis Kelce brings to this team, and he's taken the young tight ends that they have in this roster with him, with Jody Fortson and Noah Gray, and they both made strides today. Both of them did things that is great to see from your second and third tight ends. And then you look at the wide receivers. I mean, Juju had a great game. I know he had that fumble late in the first half, but I will overlook that because the defense made a great play, and they were paid to make those plays as well. 6 catches going into halftime for 80 yards. I think that's a great day for Juju. And then you look at MVS, he had a couple of catches and a couple of big third down catches, and then Hardman and Sky Moore. I mean, you just name them, and they were all involved in this game.
Yeah, you look at the top producers in terms of yardage in this game. It's Travis Kelce, and 3 of the next 4 guys are new guys. Juju Smith-Schuster had 79 yards. MVS, who you mentioned, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, had 44, and Sky Moore had just the 1 catch, but it was a 30-yard catch.
Right.
What did you see in terms of getting these guys integrated into this offense so quickly?
Well, I think what you really saw was them just understanding that Mahomes is always going to be looking downfield and always going to be looking to hit the play that is best for this team. And, Sky Moore's catch, it was a play where I didn't think he was going to be, I thought he was going about 10 yards shorter. And I don't remember who the receiver was at the time, but Moore was open behind him. And Moore made a great play to make it a 30-yard gain. It probably should have only been, 10, 15, maybe even closer to 20, but Moore made a heck of a run and a nice jab, and off to the races he went for 30 yards. And then you look at the other guys. Juju just kept getting open and kept making plays. He had a couple of big third downs as well. And MVS is the guy I think that is going to be somebody that is going to take some time to maybe get in stride with Patrick Mahomes. And you have to remember, we're also not talking about a draw or a missed long shot to Tyreek Hill. A couple of them actually, early in the game and late in the game, that Mahomes missed. Those are the shots we're not talking about, but he still had 5 TDs and 360 yards. So I think this offense is going to be good.
Coming up, the Minnesota Vikings stunned the Packers in Kevin O'Connell's first game. Now on to Sleeper. Sleeper is the fastest growing fantasy platform today. With the NFL season kicking off, Sleeper is climbing the charts with over 4 million users. They have over 22 new features, including a new over-under game integrated right into the fantasy interface. The first sports game contest built right into the fantasy experience. So not only can you enter a contest via over-under itself, but you can also do so through their Fantasy Leagues matchup screen. I already use Sleeper for my fantasy teams. You probably do too. Now you can play over-unders right in that screen. For example, pick rushing yards or passing yards, and then choose the amount of money that you want to enter into the contest. If you pick the over or the under correctly, you can win anywhere from 2 times to over 20 times the money you put in. That's not money you're going to get anywhere else. That payout is not what other platforms are offering. Plus, the built-in group chat feature lets you let your friends know about what picks you are nailing and which ones they are not. On your mobile phone, join our listener group at sleeper.com/lockedon today, and Sleeper will automatically match your first deposit up to $100. Go to sleeper.com/lockedon today, and you'll get a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. The Kevin O'Connell era has gotten off to a cracking start in Minnesota, a 23-7 beatdown of the Green Bay Packers, who did not come to play in week 1. But you know who did? Justin Jefferson, who set a career high for receiving yards. And the Packers did this funny thing where they just decided, man, we're not going to cover him. And it was a strategy that did not pay off for them. Cotton. Speaking of Cotton, Luke Braun from Locked On Vikings.
Why am I Cotton?
I don't know. We're just going to go with it. Luke, offensively, it sort of looked like what we thought it would when Justin Jefferson said, oh, now I get why Cooper Kupp is always open. He was always open on Sunday.
Yeah, there was a lot of motion. That's what the Packers weren't ready for. There was a lot of motion, a lot of moving him around the formation. And I would imagine if Joe Barry had his way, Jair Alexander would have been on Jefferson all day no matter what. But he didn't quite feel confident enough to go full on like YOLO shadow. Like, I know Alexander has done that in the past, like the Vikings did with like Xavier Rhodes a few years ago. And so that meant that when Justin Jefferson motions from a 2x2 over into a 3x1 over on the other side, like when he's motioning across the formation, changing the weight of the formation, how many players are on each side, it changes all the rules. And having to process that, as well as, hey, keep an eye on 18, was too much, especially for Quay Walker. I think they really picked on him a lot and got that matchup like a lot more than I think the Packers would have wanted.
A lot of motion to test Quay Walker's eyes. Quay Walker, of course, the first round rookie the Packers used in the trade that they got for Devontae Adams with Las Vegas. Their receivers did very little in this game as well. Let's talk about that Vikings defense, Luke, because they made life very difficult for Aaron Rodgers. They did not stop the run particularly effectively, but it didn't matter because they harassed Aaron Rodgers all day.
Yep.
And did so without having to blitz, without having to bring extra bodies.
There was some, but yeah, there was a lot of 4-man rush, a lot of Zadarius Smith. The petty revenge game came out the way that it's come out, I guess, for him in the past. Some Danielle Hunter, a lot of penetration from Dalvin Tomlinson. I thought he had a really nice game. And I thought Harrison Phillips had a really nice game. Really big role in that 4th and 1 goal line stop. That was such a big deal. Kind of set the tone for the whole game, I think. But man, Rodgers not running around like he used to, huh? Can I bring out the W word?
Well, you probably should not bring up the W word because we know.
Can I bring out the W word about 4
that...
hours after the Vikings beat the Packers?
Listen, if you want to do it, but he's going to put it on his bulletin board at home, and that's fine. But I assume the W word you're talking to rhymes with washed. And so if you want to bring it out, you're more than welcome to do it, Luke. I'll give you the floor.
No, I mean, I am not used to watching him crumple into sacks. That's what really tips me off. Like, I'm used to watching him. He'll run around. He'll get sacked sometimes. But there was a number of times, like only about half the time he got pressure did he try to scramble, like extend the play, maybe find something, play that schoolyard ball. That's kind of been what makes Rodgers. But there were a lot of times where he just didn't have that. And he just like went into it. And you could tell his neck was bothering him in that game. So health is going to be something to watch, I guess, for the Packers moving forward. But for the Vikings, it was that front. The secondary held up really well. There were some coverage sacks and coverage pressures, and I'm really excited to see on tape what it looks like. But that front was just on another level. And that's what we were hoping for when we put so much darn money into it.
And not that you need any more flowers today because, the Vikings won the Super Bowl, but
that's 3 in a row. It's a dynasty.
You did call out on our crossover show when you were on Locked On Packers. We were talking about the Vikings defense, and you called out the play of Harrison Phillips and said he looks really good in camp, and this is going to be a guy that makes an impact. And he certainly made an impact. Mm-hmm. Not only did he make an impact on that 4th down call, but he got the pressure that flushed Rodgers out or helped get the pressure when he threw the interception to Harrison Smith. So A big game for him, and a great call by you.
Yep. Turns out I was right about at least one thing in that show. I was right. There were coverage busts on the Vikings, but the Packers failed to capitalize on them. Either by the drive stalling out later or a turnover later or something like that, or sometimes just not being able to pull the play off, or there was pressure. But I do think that the Vikings on the back end were more discombobulated than they looked, but that's what pressure will do.
And finally, the Washington Commanders have had a year, haven't they? Name changes, congressional hearings, investigations. It's been a laundry list a reality TV show would die to write. Some fans noticed in the gift shop, though, that the Commanders apparently have forgotten where they are from. A mug with the Commanders logo was being sold, and in the background of the logo was the state outline of, wait for it, Washington State. Last I checked, the Commanders were in D.C. Is Dan Snyder trying to abscond to Spokane? Do they have non-extradition there? We'll see. Thanks for making Locked On Sports today your first listen. Now go find your favorite team's Locked On podcast and make them your second listen. Coming up tomorrow, how will Russell Wilson fare against his old team? So at least until tomorrow, stay Locked On Sports today.
Locked On Podcast Network and Odyssey present Locked On Sports Today.